So how do you buy a property investment with no money down? Well, there's a couple of different ways to look at it. So firstly, I'm going to assume that you already own a property, and we're going to use some round numbers. So I'm going to assume that your family home is worth around about $1.5 million, and that you've got around about $1 million of equity, so your mortgage is $500K. So how do we buy a second property? Let's say you want to buy another rental property, $1 million, that's around about the average Auckland house price at the moment. You don't want to buy something, in the wops that's, quite run down, but you're not planning on buying something that's, 5-bedroom in Flatbush, that's probably more like 1.5 million. So what we need is a deposit. You're not going to be able to buy a property with no deposit, and we've got to find somewhere to get that deposit. So you need a cash or a cash equivalent deposit. And for investment properties with the new rules, you need around about 35%. Now you can get away with as low as 20%. Some of the main banks will do 30% deposit, but for this exercise we're going to do 35%. So for $1 million we're going to need $350K as a deposit on this property. So where we get that deposit is we top up your mortgage on your own occupied property, on your family home, and we use that as a deposit for the next property. And so that money goes through the lawyer's account, and then you use that as a deposit. And then what will happen is, using a second bank or even at your main bank, we get the rest of the money, 65%, as new mortgage. So this property is effectively 100% financed using equity in your own home and then a mortgage on the property. So it's pretty basic, right? No cash in your bank account except the equity you've got in your home, and you can buy another property. Now, what if you didn't quite have enough equity for a 35% deposit? Now, what these non-bank or second-tier lenders offer is 80% finance on investment properties. And this is, taking into account the serviceability calculations. So what will happen is, let's say your current mortgage was, a bit higher, and you were only able to get, say, 200 grand and use that down here. So in that case, that 200 grand come down here and be a 20% deposit. And with the non-bank lender, because they're not bound by the same loan-to-value ratio rules that the Reserve Bank puts on main banks, you can get 80% lending on the investment property. So it's still 100% financed, but you don't need as much equity in your family home or whatever home you're using as security to get that next property. So you do have to be careful, because when you're using the non-banks, your equity is quite a bit lower because you've topped up higher, but you are maximizing your leverage. And there's a couple of reasons that you might do that. Firstly, you feel like you're buying this investment property undervalued. Or you may feel like your assets are in a strong position. another thing that might be a strong reason that you want to do this is that you've got strong income and you're confident in your ability to build a property portfolio if interest rates go up. Because just in this scenario alone, using the non-bank lender, then in the scenario, if you've got 2 million of mortgage debt at 5% a year, 5%, you can do the maths. It's like $100 grand or more of interest expense annually, and if these mortgages aren't covering the cost of that, then you've got to be prepared that if people are missing rent or your place is unrented or the rates keep going up, you've got to be prepared for that. And so the exciting thing about this is if you've got your family home, got a lot of equity, you can buy a property that has, you might buy a $600,000 property, which are plenty of them, that's 1,000 square meters or thereabouts, and then you might try and build some properties, so another house or few units, or we've seen seven terrace houses going on 1,000 square properties that they keep the existing home there. So this is how you buy an investment property with no money down. You're using the equity you've got, so you top up your current mortgage and then you get approval. So the other thing to take into account is this debt can be on interest only if it's investment property, and if you know how to structure the application correctly, this debt here, so all of the investment debt can be structured on interest only, and when you're working with a competent accountant, there's that tax efficient stuff in there. So don't stress too much about the new rules. There's still plenty of advantages to be had.